Good evening. I'm Jeanette Pollard, the host of Culture, Class, and Consciousness. Thank you so much for tuning in this evening. Tonight's broadcast promises to be exciting and controversial. We will be talking about reparations, and I will introduce these people here. I'm expecting one other person, and by phone. I have one reparations person by phone. From my far left is Dr. Amy Jenkins, who is representing Black Empowerment and Black Lawyers for Justice. As some of you may know, its founder is attorney Malik Zulu Shabazz. Next to Dr. Jenkins is attorney Amos Jones, representing the A.D.O.S. Society. He is a local civil rights and employment attorney. Next to attorney Jones is attorney Adjoa Aiyetoro, who is representing NCOBRA. And on phone is Mr. Shawn E, representing the A.D.O.S. Thank you all for being here. And I just wanted to tell the listening audience the reason why I invited these various groups. As a result of what happened on Capitol Hill on June 19th, I saw on social media some controversy of people having different viewpoints about reparations. Some of it was not nice, but my goal, and I'm not a part of any specific group, let me make that disclaimer at the beginning, but I interact, and everybody here knows me to have been involved in whatever protests or activities or programs they have had. So my goal is to have each person give their particular organization's platform so that we can find some commonalities and so that we can move forward. And as I've entitled this particular broadcast, Reparations, Varied Paths to the Same Goal. So I'm going to ask Dr. Jenkins to talk a little bit about what the platform. I'm going to give everybody like 2 minutes, and then we're going to go around, and then you can talk more. So give us some information about Black empowerment and what your initial information, just the basics initially.
Okay. So in regards to Black empowerment, we are consisted of a number of organizations, okay? It's not just Black empowerment, it's the Movement for Black Power, it's the new Black Panther Party, it's the Black Lawyers for Justice under the attorney Malik Zulu Shabazz. And the platform basically is to come as a united front, all right? A united front of collective, because the one thing about reparations is there's something that we cannot do alone. You know, a lot of times we have dismissed the fact of saying the word reparations before we can say the word unity, because we can't fight it with just one organization. Mm-hmm. No one is going to be able to make that key filing. It's just going to take us to the next level. We've tried that. You know, people in different court hearings have filed for reparations cases. Yes, some people have won, okay? We have some people who have won in part, you know, on one area, and then it's been remanded to go back for another issue. The key is we have to get through those barriers, and we have to be able to address them collectively as a unified front to see where we're going with each organization and what we can provide legally, philosophically, judicially. You know, we have to come together to make sure that that happens.
Okay, all right. So, Attorney Jones, talk about the organization. I think you were the co-founder.
Well, yes. So I represent on this panel tonight the American Descendants of Slaves Society. And we are collateral, if you will, with the American Descendants of Slavery movement. We are an organization that organized when we felt that A.D.O.S. was being COINTELPRO'd, and that is when MSNBC put very strange panelists on a Saturday to discredit the idea that a Descendants of Slaves movement even existed. And we sprang into action, and we formed this A.D.O.S. Society to support the work of what the people who are known as the founders of the A.D.O.S. movement, attorney Antonio Moore in Los Angeles and journalist activist Yvette Carnell in Atlanta. We knew that we needed an organizational structure. We strive to be a diplomatic arm because many of us are card-carrying members of NCOBRA and these predecessor organizations that have been doing fine work for the last 40 to 50 to 60 years and all the way back. we understand the need for boots on the ground, and that's why the American Descendants of Slaves Society, and we do say slaves because the slaves are persons, and that's how we've been regarded religiously and everything else in terms of our identity historically. We're founded under the African American Trust for Historic Preservation, which is a Kentucky-based organization that since 2017 has worked to preserve slavery-era black churches. So we are asserting a black heritage motif and a tradition that we hope, instead of attacking the work that came before and the people who have a deeper view and longstanding relations, such as NCOBRA, we believe that we can share and learn from and grow together. Because if we're fighting NCOBRA, or we're fighting the Black Power crowd, or Black Lawyers for Justice, how on earth are we going to get Mitch McConnell to allow a reparations bill to come to a vote, or President Trump to sign it? So we need to kind of go back to what our elders used to understand, which is that you need Republicans and Democrats to pass the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which is still very strong and helpful to us after all these years. So A.D.O.S. Society is trying to build diplomatic bridges in a credible organizational structure that's all comers.
Okay. All right, Attorney Adjoa, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for asking me.
Okay.
As Jeanette said, I represent the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America, NCOBRA. I'm one of its co-founding members, as well as organizationally. NCOBRA was formed organizationally in 1987 by three organizations: the Republic of New Africa, the New African Peoples Organization, and the National Conference of Black Lawyers, of which I co-chaired at that time. I served as the first NCOBRA co-chair and was chair of its Legal Strategies Commission for a number of years. NCOBRA's program is probably known to most of the viewers and listeners of this program. NCOBRA's fundamental program is to develop strategies to obtain reparations for African descendants in the United States. We have formed several sections in the organization that lead the work: legislative, legal strategies, which is a little defunct at this point, education, and a few others that I can't remember. And so our focus is to obtain reparations, to educate the community, to mobilize around it. And in the past, I would say maybe 7, 8, 9, 10 years, the primary focus has been legislation. We were in the founders, Ray Jenkins, Reparations Ray Jenkins in Detroit lobbied Congressman Conyers to draft and file a bill, H.R. 40, which all of you know about. It's been modified, which maybe we can get to later. But we've been behind that bill, but we've also done other things. But right now, our primary focus is getting H.R. 40 and now SB 1083 passed.
All right, so my guest by phone is Mr. Shawn Hill of ADOS. Shawn, are you still there?
Yes, I'm still here.
Okay, so can you tell the viewing audience, fellas, engineers, can you put Shawn's picture up, please? All right, so this is Shawn Hill. So can you tell the viewing audience a little bit about the platform of ADOS?
Yes. Well, I would encourage everybody, and also I'd like to thank you for this opportunity. I'm honored to be with you, everyone here tonight. Welcome, everyone. I would encourage everyone to go to ADOS101.com. There's a listing of just the particulars, but just on a high, 30,000-foot level of what the movement is about. We're about reparations for American descendants of slavery. That's one piece of what we're about. We're also about ending mass incarceration and also closing the racial wealth gap. So those are the big kind of overall overreaching, platforms that we're pushing for American descendants of slavery in obviously in the United States. So the main thing that I want to say is that we just have to continue to work hard and move forward. And I appreciate everybody that's on here today. In fact, the biggest challenge is not the group that we have in front of us. Is the number of people, number of black people, how we want to describe them, that don't think that Black Americans should even have reparations. That's really the biggest challenge, because until we can get that group on board, we'll all face many challenges. So it's a pleasure to be here.
All right. Speaking to that in terms of the percentages of Black people, African Americans, whatever people designate themselves to be of African descent, I know I saw on your page that you read an article, or you cited an article that said only some 58%, I think it was, of Black people are for reparations, and I responded back and said someone posted that there was a Gallup poll that came out on Monday that said about 73% of Black people are for reparations. Now, this question is to the group. Why do you think some Black people, African descendants, don't feel that they deserve reparations? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think first of all, I think in a way, and I think we don't need to focus on who the Blacks that don't support it. I think we need to build support for it. I think that it's kind of based on a theory that somehow we have to be unanimous. And that's something that the whites who oppose reparations have been pushing since we began working, I'm sure before we began working in '87 under other movements for reparations, that somehow all Black people have to agree. And therefore we can't get it until that happens. So I'm jumping in here now to kind of disabuse us of that theory. The Japanese Americans obtained reparations, and there was a lot of division among Japanese Americans. We need a critical mass. I believe, as your statistic is closer to what I had heard. Several of my colleagues have done some research into that, and I think it's closer to 70-some% that support it, which I think is a good critical mass. The second piece that you asked is why don't all Black people support it? Well, we're not homogenous. I mean, people have different reasons. I know some people. I had an affair at my parents' home years ago in which I talked about reparations, and some people are not opposed to it. They just don't think it'll ever happen. So they may be checking the opposed to it block because they think it'll never happen. Others are opposed to it. I mean, we've heard some people say in the media, not in public forum, that they're opposed to it because they think that somehow re-stigmatizes us. I mean, it's a whole argument against affirmative action, which is crazy, but that's their view. And so those are some of the reasons I've heard that people may be opposed to it. But I want to kind of put emphasis on we do not have to have 100% of Black folks saying they support reparations before we can win reparations, because other groups have won. We didn't have 100% of Black folks in the civil rights movement. So we had, you talk to them now, we had 100%. Everybody was there, supposedly. But we didn't. We had a critical mass, and a critical mass is like a tipping point number. And it's not even 50%, but we have more than 50%.
Okay.
Well,
go ahead.
Well, one of the things that I must say is that I do have to agree in part with the fact that everybody is not going to be on board for reparations. But it doesn't stop the education portion that must happen with reparations, because we know that even as attorneys, you guys know this, that public policy plays a large part into the overturning of any type of decision. So, for example, if a man is locked up, for example, and you want him released, if the people come together as a whole, okay, it will probably be in the best interest, right, of national security to go ahead. If there's a big crowd outside of 1 million people, it may be in the best interest for you to let that person go.
Okay.
So we have to understand truly, even during the civil rights movement, we stood out on the line in large formats. All right, we came out. And because we came out, even during the time of MLK, for example, it put pressure on them as a public policy concern to make the right decision. So sometimes we can't forget how to educate and put the heat where it needs to be in order to make them do what we need them to do.
16 years ago, is when I first encountered NCOBRA, and I was a graduate student in New York City. And there was a mass meeting at the Abyssinian Baptist Church. Charles Ogletree was on the panel. Professor Suzette Malveaux, I think still of Catholic University of America, was on the panel. And an NCOBRA young man was on the panel. And he said something I didn't understand until I enrolled in law school the next year at a school that emphasizes public policy. And he said, folks, at the end of the meeting, from the panel, he said, we can be legal in all of this, but this is going to be a political fight. Mm-hmm. This is going to be fundamentally political. And that actually elevates it, because the voting is more legitimate than anything else. Right. And so if we can just get enough people. Now, what's ironic is, I remember the polling around the year 2000. 95% of blacks supported reparations around the year 2000, yes. And only 5% of whites did. So I don't know how that plummeted with all the wealth inequality we've had over the last generation of these in vivo transfers, intergenerational wealth that's building in every community but the Black American community. And we're worse off relative to the whites than we've been probably since maybe slavery. Absolutely. So you think that we'd be worse. So my answer is, the reason a whole lot more people are not back at that 95% is they don't know how bad off we are economically, and that we're going to be worse off having nothing as a group in about 25 years. So I think that's part of our education process, and that's why I got caught up in a good way with following Yvette Carnell and Antonio Moore and their program, because all they talk about, and it's central, is our economic plight and how it's a facsimile of slavery, mass incarceration, Jim Crow segregation, convict leasing, and a whole chain of implication. So I look forward to our having boots on the ground, having political activity like the elders have done and know how to do, organization, interrelation, bring in the mosques and the churches, because it will be political, as everything is in this country.
Okay, Shawn, you want to jump in on and give a comment?
Absolutely. And when I said that we have to get our people together, obviously, well, I won't say obviously, I did not mean 100%. But let me give you a perfect example. We can look at the CBC, as I like to call them, the Congressional Black Cowards. Even they are not 100% on board with H.R. 40. There's seven of them who have not co-sponsored this bill. Now, they've been 100% on H.R. 6 for Dreamers. They're 100% on H.R. 1044 for immigrants. But they are not 100% on board for H.R. 40 for reparations. So if we can't get that body that is supposed to be who they say they're supporting black people, that's what they say, if we can't get them on board, and that's where the process has to go through, then I'm at a loss how anything else is going to move forward. So we have to hold our elected officials accountable and say that this is unacceptable. If you can be on board for immigrants, which is fine, that's what you want to do. If you want to be on board for the Dreamers, then that's fine. But black people are supposed to sit back and accept the fact that you're not 100% on board for H.R. 40. A study for it's not even reparations. It's a study to commission reparations. And so with that bar set that low, I think that's despicable.
Well, as of, I think about a week ago, there are actually only 4 or 3 that now have not signed on. They, a couple of them signed on recently. And I think the effort has to be, I agree with Shawn, the effort has to be to get all of them on board. But as of this point, I believe only 4, or maybe it's down to 3, are not signed up, and so that effort is still going on to get them on, because I agree. The second thing, though, is I think that it's important to understand what the bill is. The bill is an important bill, and I'm speaking because I don't want to minimize the importance of this bill. This bill is a modified version of what was passed to obtain reparations for the Japanese Americans. So it is a strong vehicle. The first bill up until 2017 was an exact model of the Japanese redress bill. Exact model. And Congressman Kanye's argument in support of doing it that way was that if the Japanese American bill passed, surely this will, be harder to not pass a bill for reparations. What happened in 2016 and 2017 was the National African American Reparations Commission, NARC, headed by Ron Daniels, and NCOBRA with the leadership of Cam Howard, who was at that point co-chair of the Legislative Commission. They convinced John Conyers to modify the bill so that it's a study bill to study reparations proposals, not to study slavery anymore, not to study any of the precursor, but to say that, that's well documented. Now we need a commission that looks at reparations proposals and what proposals make most sense, and then that commission, as they did similar commission with the Japanese Americans in 1987, that commission will then recommend to Congress the forms reparations should take. It's not whether there should be reparations, but what forms reparations should take. Now, of course, commission could come back and say no reparations. I think that would be highly unlikely, all for the reasons Amy and Amos and others have said. I mean, we got such a movement going on. I think they would just not do that. So that's what they'll come back with. And it's important. So I really want the audience not to diminish the importance of passing this legislation. We need to get all of the Congressional Black Caucus, I agree with Shawn, but we need to get everybody that doesn't live in a district with Black Congress people.
That's right.
And even if you do, you also got some white folk representing you too. We need to get all of them on board co-sponsoring these bills.
And let me add, I told you that 20 years ago, only 5% of whites supported reparations, 95% were against. A poll came out, and we all focused in, most of us, on the percentage of blacks who were for it. But it showed recently that 10% of Republicans support the idea of reparations. That's where you've got to have, again, the diplomatic arm. You've got to have people who can make some inroads over there. I do a lot of work in more conservative religious circles, the Southern Baptists and so forth. I'm going to make a moral appeal, which is what Martin Luther King did in the first place, because Ted Cruz might pop over if you approach with the right arguments. And so to me, when I saw that 10% of Republicans are for it now, that's also the work that we've all been doing and the relationships that we've all been building coming home to roost in a positive way. So I'm very excited about the prospects. And again, my hope is that some of the, I think, ugliness that was displayed around the time of the hearing, it's already subsided. We have had some dialogue, and there's already been a more subdued, unified, deferential approach within our people, our community.
I'm going to throw this question out to the group. What do you think about people who are educated about reparations demanding of their congresspersons that there be a reparations town hall meeting in their districts? What do you think about that? Anybody?
I mean, I think that, it's good to request a town hall meeting, but I think where we are at this point, we're so far past it. Honestly, to be honest with you, our movements, at this point, we want action. It's not so much about, we understand the study piece, we understand when we look at reparations, you have to look at reparations as a political issue, an international issue, and of course a constitutional violation to not award it. Okay, so when we're talking about it collectively, we all have ways in which we want to pursue reparations. For example, HR 40 and NCOBRA's pushing HR 40. We totally say yes to that, right? But in addition to that, we're pushing nationhood, developing our own nationhood as the American Indians have done it under tribal law. So we're looking at the international ways in which we have to come up and address this. The legal minds, it is time for the legal minds to sit down and say, you know what? We got to make sure that they accept suit. There's no more sovereignty. There's no more running behind this issue. All right. The reality of it is the international players, and they know who they are involved in this. We all, as a group of trained minds, have to sit down and break this material down and figure out how we're going to get what it is that we need to get. The last case, there was a case filed in 2005. A dismissal was issued, a dismissal of this suit, and I'm not going to give the name of the case. but it was dismissed in 2005 and 2006. The court reversed in part. The reason why I'm looking at this case so deeply.
Case.
The reason why I'm looking at it so deeply is because the fact of the dismissal was the inability of them to identify or get the people, the markers, or like I said, what is it?
Badges of slavery.
Correct.
No,
I'm sorry.
The
failure to identify
was a failure of standing.
Right, the failure of standing.
Yeah.
But what that means is they failed to identify the people who, the participants. The participants, okay? So the reality of it is we have been bamboozled by not being able to do enough investigation to identify and get them to admit. We have J.P. Morgan, we know that's involved in it. J.P. Morgan just did a drug bust. Is anybody aware of that, right? With the $1 million worth of drugs coming up, trillion dollar, right?
1
point whatever it was, right? But what we failed to address and look at is that this is nothing new for J.P. Morgan. J.P. Morgan had his hand strongly in the slave trade. Okay, they were one of the main participants in slavery. What they did was they gave insurance policies to the slave owners. All right, J.P. Morgan gave insurance policies. So a lot of these banks, what they did is they financed the ship line. So J.P. Morgan financed the ship line. So all of the monies to transport slaves was given by J.P. Morgan, such as Wells Fargo. All these banks have identified that yes, they gave bank loans for insurance policies on their participants. What is it?
Manifests.
Right. They gave money and loans to the slave masters so that if they lost the slave, they will get repaid for it. So we cannot dismiss the evidence of what we have, and we have to be able to use that and make sure that they cannot back up from this anymore. These banks just can't walk away from their hand in slavery. Now, we understand it was millions of years ago, which they would like to claim it was millions of years ago, which it is not, right? Because it wasn't that far away. But we have to make sure that we're not going to take our eyes off of them, all right? We're going to pierce the corporate veil.
Yeah, 1.3 billion in the cocaine bust.
I think though, and I've worked on some of those cases, and I think we have to be careful because the problem we have legally is that the legal system in this country, not just this country, but we're in the U.S. and we're trying to sue in the U.S., is built not to allow those kinds of suits because they put what we call legally procedural hurdles. Everybody knows what a hurdle is, okay? So a hurdle is something you have to jump over. And what they have put in place are hurdles that are almost impossible to jump over in order to bring and sustain what we call a reparations lawsuit. So the case that Amy is talking about, they remanded on the issue, and remand means they sent it back. The fifth, I think it was the Fifth Circuit. Seventh Circuit sent it back, saying we agree with the whole issue of standing. There's no injury in fact, except for one claim in which they talked about taxation, and the plaintiffs decided not to proceed on that claim. But the issue really is, one, I think I agree with Amy, and I think any of us would agree, we need to come back to the drawing board among lawyers who are interested in litigating to see if there are other ways. And I know people who are interested in doing that, so I don't think we should just say I agree with Amy. We need to look at what are some legal ways in which we can bring them back to court. The other thing, though, I think is to understand that, as Amy and Amos have said, that this is really a political question as well. I wouldn't even argue primarily because that'll get us in trouble when we try and go to court, because then they'll say, well, y'all said on the radio, on the TV, that this was a political question, so why are you here, you know? But the point being, when I say political, I think that's even true for the courts.
Oh, yes.
The courts themselves are impacted. The more people, when we do another case, we need to pack that courtroom. We need to have folks outside the door trying to get in.
That's right.
We need people to be there and pressure, and not even pressure, just their presence. That was your point. Just your presence out there saying we support this lawsuit. Because when the legal minds to get together and craft a lawsuit that we can stand behind. Because see, we can get in trouble.
Yeah.
You know, if the
It
other
would be
folks
called frivolous, and then they make you pay. They make you pay.
are really mean spirited,
Yes.
which the other side could be.
Yes.
If we file something that doesn't have any real legs,
Yes.
we can lose our license.
That's right. That's right.
Right?
That's right.
Yes.
So we have a vested interest personally in making sure we don't file a frivolous
All
lawsuit.
the I's are dotted
Exactly.
and the T's are crossed.
Exactly.
Shawn, you want to jump in here and say anything?
That's true.
Oh, not on the law. That's not my field. So I'm a to the lawyer.
You in a different lane.
Step out of that one.
Okay. Let me ask this. So you think that having a town hall in a district for
I
a
want to
person?
speak
Oh
on
yeah. Okay. All right. Go ahead.
I disagree with you on that. I think having the legislators sponsor or be speakers at a town hall for reparations builds support for reparations.
Yes.
That's what we need. I agree with your point, Amy, that we need the bills passed, we need reparations proposals on the table to Congress for them to vote on. But I think town hall meetings is
yes,
one
of
way
course,
of
yeah.
building what you were
Absolutely.
saying earlier.
Absolutely.
That larger pressure. Because see, one folk, and this is not just black folks, so y'all don't go and talk about, well, just black folks. All people respond to people they feel are
Yes,
in power or have authority.
It's true. It's true.
So if Congresswoman blah blah or Congressman blah blah or Senator so and so is hosting a town hall meeting on reparations, that's going to sway, that's going to increase that number of percentage across race, not just black, white and black and Native American and Latino and all of that, who support reparations
Right.
because they put the stamp of approval on it.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And I totally respect that. The only thing is that when we have town halls, it's all good to educate the public and try to get sponsorship of the public. I totally agree with town halls. The only thing I say to that is that I don't want us to just only be comfortable. It gets to a point of complacency where we figure we can attack reparations just by having a town hall, and that's just not an effective way. The most effective way, let's say, it's an effective educational way
Yes.
of making people informed. But it is not right now. We have so many fires to put out, legally, politically, and as such, to address it, because we got to fight right now. We have a serious mind thing that we have to come together and really work out on the table and how we're going to get standing.
Well,
okay, and how we're going to make sure with this thing called political question, them saying and denying that it belongs to another branch of government or another part of the Constitution. No, it does not. We're going to address their issues, and we need to make sure that it sticks.
But
We're
see,
not
going
going
to arm. See, what I'm thinking is that's the legal group.
Yes.
The people are the town hall.
Oh, right.
So that's not in competition.
Right. That's
not in
They're the
competition.
support.
We need
Yes.
the people out there.
Exactly.
And if the senators and the Congress people,
I
much
agree.
like we have,
Totally.
we've all of us have organized things, and it was from
Yes,
NCOBRA,
yes,
from
yes.
York, from that. What I'm saying is that's not in
Yes.
competition with that.
No, that's
we
not.
have
It's
to
not. It's a
do
separate-
all of that.
Everything.
That's what I'm.
We
yeah,
have
I
to
agree.
do all of that.
Yes, ma'am.
A
Yes.
town hall meeting gets people out that
Come
would
on.
never come out if we had it.
That's it.
You know?
Yes.
And so we need those folks.
It's,
we need
it's,
the
it's
conservatives.
and this is why I say a unified and collective front.
Yes.
That's why unity is so important.
Yeah.
Because even when we bring these organizations and they say, well, you're doing this and you're doing that and you're doing this, it's a collective. What we have to do is sit at the table collectively. We got town halls. We got HR 40 bills being passed. We got legal filings being made. That's how much stuff we need as a group
Yes.
to be putting into this thing.
Yes.
It's all of it.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
and guess what? It's going to take, and a lot of times, and I have to give applause to you two, honestly, because what we do when we graduate law school is a lot of lawyers, they say, well, I don't got time for that. They get into what's called
Easy.
The golden
the payout,
Or just
right?
handcuffs.
So it's more so, let me just come out
not
here and
usually
get into
golden.
white supremacy and just go ahead. I just want to suck up that, this is what they're taught. Okay, when you're in law school, luckily I went to a black law school, but when you are, what they're taught and trained to do is just go out there and work for the man. That's what they're taught out. They're taught to do that. So it's like you're learning basically a Juris Doctorate. You're learning Latin, the way of the white man, the way of to go out there and make an honest living for yourself and go out there and take some contract cases a little quick payout. But we don't, it takes a lot for us as a whole and the real legal minds to say, you know what, we got to start fighting for things that really matter. You understand what I'm saying? This is something that's affecting millions of people, trillions of our people. This is damaging our people. This is the most important issue that we need to be addressing. And I'm calling and I'm challenging every doggone legal mind. And I'm sorry to say it because it kind of pisses me off, but that's why I have to give you guys respect in regards to this. Because it's not too many attorneys that is going to come out and fight for it. Because what it is the green ticket. They're looking for the green ticket.
Well, it's getting worse.
And getting the payout.
I'm not sure that's correct.
I'm not saying all.
Well,
I'm not saying all, but I am saying some.
Here's where I can agree, Amy. There is an urgency about this issue because, as ADOS has pointed out with the data, we are a bottom caste people permanently designed to be that way.
Yes.
There's a mentality, and the white lady, Marianne Williamson, was excellent on this in the debate. I asked, why can't a black Baptist minister speak spiritually like this New Age woman out here who's white, where she said there is a spiritual... She is from Detroit. But she explained there's a spiritual problem out there that is coming back and forth all the time. Wells Fargo, they stole money from black people and Hispanics in home closings and loans in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. So what did they do? They had to pay a $40 million fine to the federal government. Why didn't they pay me? I've had accounts at Wells Fargo for 23 years since I was a freshman in college. I'm black. Show me who the racist is in my branch and make them pay me the money. Where do we get that black people are never supposed to have cash? And this is a spiritual issue in our country where we have designed it to where Negroes think, I ain't supposed to get no check. We need a program. Well, we have those. And the problem is we're going broke. The reason that people are doing the golden handcuffs now, or just handcuffs, is there are student loans. The cost of law school has doubled since I was there 13 years ago. Because the white people with all of that money, they can pay $200,000 for it. It's the black people strung out on loans, non-dischargeable in bankruptcy, who have to be stuck and you're neutralized. The wealth is being weaponized to neutralize us. And if we don't jump on this reparations thing now with this kind of urgency, we're going to be in a huge re-enslavement process that's as bad as mass incarceration in its effects. And it's affecting black relationships and black families. We don't have anything as a group. And everybody knows it. We look good. We drive nice cars. We are bad off.
Shawn, you want to jump in here?
Yes. I do think we need to have town halls, and I think the places that we need to start are with the Congressional Black Caucus that have not signed on as of yet.
Yes, sir.
I did look at H.R. 116 Congress, and if you look at those, the latest co-sponsors, there are not these 7 that I will name out, and this is where the town hall needs to be. Mark Vesey, Antonio Delgado, Colin Allred, Emmanuel Cleaver, Lauren Underwood, Stephen Horsford, Lucy McBath. That's where we need to have them because they need to be on record as to why they have not supported this bill. So if we're going to have town halls anywhere, it needs to be in these cowards' district.
Yes.
Well, let me just say
something. I want to say 2 things. One, I honestly think that we do ourselves a disservice to use terms that demean people. You think they're cowards. There may be other reasons they're doing it, and I don't know them, so I'm not trying to take it for them personally. But one of the things that I think that, at least my view, and I think in NCOBRA's view and NARC's view, I can't speak for NARC, I don't belong to them, but I work with them, is that what we're trying to do is win. And you don't win by marginalizing or insulting people, whether or not you actually believe they're cowards or not. So that's one comment. The second comment is, I think that I understand the economic argument. You're absolutely correct. There is an economic argument, but there is also a social justice argument. It's not about economics, all about economics, and reparations can't be all about economics. We are dealing, if we look at every area and venue of our lives, there is legacies of slavery, which is part of what we want reparations for up till now, that is the criminal punishment system. I think Amy or you talked about mass incarceration. That's not simply economics.
Right.
That is black. I mean, you hear people like I'm blanking on his name now, who was on the panel, Glover, and others standing on the corner not being picked up or being arrested. Healthcare. Big studies show how we are treated differently. Racism has folded over. How the studies that are being certified for treatment are certified on whites and not on blacks.
Oh, absolutely.
So heart disease. We're talking about what happened with HIV. Big study out of NIH came out about HIV. So I think for me, and for NCOBRA, we cannot just say that the only reason we need reparations is economics. That the treatment of blacks from enslavement till now, and we call it the legacy of veterans of slavery, have been in every hallmark. Getting loans. You can qualify for a loan. It's not even about whether you can qualify or not. And study after study done by white folk and black folk and other people. It's not just done by somebody who had a predisposition or whatever. Show that black people are not getting loans to purchase property, businesses, and that kind of thing. That qualify just as much as a white person. So yes, there is a disparity economically. We are still, I think, what is the data shows that average black person makes 70% of what the average white person makes. Maybe it's, don't quote me, y'all, but that's about it. So yes, I agree with the economic argument, but I think we lose if that's all we focus on, because there are many of our people, not enough, but I'm not poor. I'm not gonna sit up here and lie and say I'm poor.
Right.
I'm not poor.
Right.
I don't struggle financially. I have a good retirement, and I left my field I was a professor of law. I made a good salary. I worked for the ACLU. No, we didn't make as much as if I was on a big firm or something like that. But that was your point. I chose that. I could have gone to a firm. I chose public interest law. So I think we have to, we can't overstate the argument. It's bad enough without overstating, because there are a whole bunch of black folk ain't poor.
But see, obviously, obviously, this is where there's a deep philosophical divide, and it's age-driven. If you were born at the right moment, that is, if you were a baby boomer, or maybe an older generation Xer, when the fruits of these corrective policies, like Maynard Jackson's affirmative action programs in Atlanta, and Richard Nixon's, which created a lot of black millionaires. One public works project alone, the airport in Atlanta, created 21 black millionaires in the 70s in Atlanta, thanks to Maynard Jackson. That was when the credit was easier for black businesses. If you're 40 and under, there's nothing. I mean, this is really a divide between the older people and the younger people, because we're living in a very bad situation, even people who seem to be privileged. And the fact of the matter is, everything is so expensive. Who can afford this stuff? I mean, who can really afford the gentrifying prices of the median home price now in D.C.? It was $500,000 when I came here 12 years ago, and now it's $605,000. That's not black people. And so the fact of the matter is, in the group, this is a group issue. We're focusing on the economic because that's a variable that can now be isolated. We have worked on all the white attitudinal problems. We have worked on all the mass incarceration. We've done all of this, and that needs to continue to be done. But we are suffering. If you're undercapitalized in a capitalistic system, you're nothing. You're chattel slavery again. And that's what we're living.
Yeah, but what he just did, and I'm going to push back on that, is he went to ageism. And that is incorrect. If you look at the studies from the period when I was coming up, which I am a baby boomer, but you look at them till now, there's not that much difference. There is not that much difference in those studies. I know young black people I know young black people who are struggling, who are poor. But I also know young black people 40 and under, 45 and under, not baby boomers by any means, who are doing things in the economy. All I'm saying is not that there isn't a distinction between black and white. Don't go to age. That's insulting. It's insulting.
No.
It is insulting because my daddy struggled. That's insulting. It's insulting because my father couldn't get loans. My cousins couldn't get loans who are in my age group. There are people in my age group who couldn't get loans because of discrimination. And it's still going on. It is not an age issue. It is a discrimination issue. And it's one that continues, and we have to deal with it. All I'm saying is we don't have to deal with that solely. Because if we do, we lose. Because the criminal punishment system in healthcare is not about money.
We feel insulted as younger people in that we come out with $200,000 in student loan debt. We have a small business administration that had approximately 9% of their loans going to black businesses when Obama came into office. When he left, because of the reforms and all the tightening, it was 1% according to one study. Black people need capital. Young entrepreneurs need capital, especially when you're strung out on student loan debt. I mean, it's almost like two Americas. It's like there are two black Americas. And it's not ageism. This is about demography. We respect that the boomers fought and knocked down those doors. We have affirmative action because of the boomers. But what we also understand is that we are entering a largely untenable economic situation because of a lack of wealth transfers and things.
Shawn, you want to jump in here? Hello?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Sure, you want to jump in and make comment?
No, I agree with what Amos said, and I don't want to get too much off into the age thing, whether it is or not. We know. I would just encourage anyone to look at the data. Yes, there are some people of all ages that are doing well, but that's just a normal bell curve. You're going to have some people at all opposite ends. One that's going to be doing well regardless, and others that are going to be struggling. But what happens when you add racism and to that bell curve is it shifts it down. So yes, you'll always have a segment of the group that is doing quite well, but even that segment will not be doing as well as white people, and that's where you see the racial wealth gap. And the only thing I want to say about calling them cowards is stand by what I said, and what I will say to anybody is that there's going to come a time, and I think for a lot of black people, that time is now, where the excuses will no longer be acceptable, where our Congressional Black Caucus, our Congressional Black cowards, some of them, can sign on to bills for everybody else or other people, but can't sign on to bills for black people and then have no explanation. I've called these people. I'm not telling you something that I've heard. I'm telling you something I've done. I call these people. I've talked to their offices. Most of these people in the office don't even know what HR 40 is. When I ask them, have they made any statement on reparations this year, they say no. So that's why I call them cowards, and I stand by it.
Okay. All right. Now let me ask this to the group. Do you think there is such a thing as each reparations group having a particular lane in which they can function in? And let me explain. I remember when I was in missions in seminary, our professor talked about the Methodists were big on education. That's what their driving thing was. The Baptists were big on social justice and movement. The Pentecostal folks were big on, they might not go out on that picket sign, but they were going to be in the church praying. Do you think that that's the kind of thing that these groups, these reparations groups represent? Everybody has their lane that they're the best at, or they feel more comfortable. I know you said NCOBRA seems to be doing more than some of the other groups that I'm aware of in terms of the legislative aspect. So,
NCOBRA is the most widely effective. I mean, that can be proven, I think. NCOBRA has covered all bases almost singularly, for all these. That's why we got a hearing. And that hearing gave political legitimacy. We should have been shouting to the heavens, grateful that hearing happened, because it legitimized it all of a sudden. And that was a culmination of decades of work from a very effective organization. But the question is, are there different lanes? And you're answering this time.
I think that one thing is... With our organization, we have to, or with just our organization and whatever organization that you are part of, it's kind of like the house Negro and the field Negro. I'm taking it back here because sometimes what we do in organizations is we understand, we fail to realize we think one way is just the only way. But if you go to a Baptist church, your preacher has a way in which he does his sermon. In the next church, in the Pentecostal, you have a way in which they may do what they choose to do.
Right.
And it doesn't mean one is better than the next. I mean, because the issue is we all are under one God, right? And so we have to kind of look at it like that. When we're working together in these organizations, there is no house Negro, I'm better than you, or you're better than me in these organizations. We all have a lane, which we're describing. Just like in NCOBRA, we thank NCOBRA for the political piece, because NCOBRA has been totally effective in regards to pushing that political piece behind reparations. But there's other parts about in each movement that they tend to do successfully. And just like, for example, the new Black Panther Party or Attorney Malik Zulu Shabazz, Warrior for Justice, these type of things sometimes need to be found. Dr. Mustafa Ansari, he's an international rights attorney, and which is pushing reparations from that end. We just have so many different pieces of the puzzle that can't work without a collective front. It just can't. So it's kind of like even with the church and the Catholic system. The Catholic Church, even though they have different parts, all of them are unified under one structure. They still have words that come and rules that come to the divisions. It's not like, well, we're independent and we can just do, no.
Except George Stallings.
A little bit.
And Father Flake.
He's still in it.
He's still in the system, but they make exceptions for him.
But collectively, you get so much done as a collective front, and that's what I want to keep the focus on. I think enough of the bickering, I'm here, I'm right. Yes, you are. But also take into recognition that there are other ways in which we need to add to that. And there's other avenues and words that we can make it more effective.
Which was why I was out there in my chair with my picket sign near Congress, but I was also out there in front of come out the house, Mitch. Come out the house, Mitch. Because I believe I believe in direct action. I'm from Detroit. We shut down a mall for a year. Hey, I believe in direct action. Shawn, you want to jump in here? Because let me just say this, because I have seen some of the emphasis on data that A.D.O.S. does. You want to jump in here on that, Shawn?
Well, I think the main thing that we need to focus on, that all of us need to focus on, is I do think there are different lanes. And I think we all have the same goal. I think the worst thing that we can do is attack each other or say that one person is not as good or anything else. Who knows whose way will be the right way? It may be a little of all of our pieces. And so I think as long as we have that as our focus, that we're working towards the same goal. I may have a different strategy than you do. You may have a different strategy than I do, but it doesn't make one person any less, or certainly my hope is that we all be successful. If NCOBRA with their strategy gets it done, well, that benefits me too. So it would be absurd for me to say, well, I don't want that way to work. So I think the main thing is that we all work towards a common goal and be respectful. At the end of the day, we don't all have to be agreeable, but we always want to be respectful of each other.
Okay.
The one thing I think is I agree with Shawn. If I think I'm hearing him right, I don't think we should worry about lanes. I think things kind of naturally develop. The ADOS with the data collection, and then other things. I mean, NCOBRA is a little it has a broad, used to have a broad approach, and now is focusing more on the legislation. I think that just one modification, and I'm not sure that's what Shawn meant, but one modification is, I think when we win, I don't believe in ifs, because I don't work, I believe we're going to win. So, but when we win, it will be a we winning. It won't be an NCOBRA program that won the day, or an ADOS program, or a Black Empowerment program. It will be all of that culminating together to put what Amy talked about, the huge pressure. So even if we don't talk a lot together, when I agree with Amy, I think we need to make more of an effort to work collectively and in unity together. I think that the win is our win. The win is not one group's win, it's our win.
The one thing, and I'm sorry that Mr. John Cheeks couldn't be here, but if anybody has not taken a look at the comprehensive plan that he has for DC Recovery Act, it's a very comprehensive one that, and I had him on my broadcast at least 4 times. It starts with the identification of folks who are eligible through DNA testing. And that lays the foundation, and then you move on from there, which covers housing, it covers education, and all those things. So I would urge people to look at that as not, as the perfect thing, but as some ideas to look at. You want to comment?
And you're exactly right in regards to what you just mentioned. The fact of, with John Cheeks and his DC Recovery Act, there are portions of the act that are significant. All right. And that goes to say that there are portions that need to be under review.
Yes.
So as a whole, we can't say we're going to put a stamp on it, because that would be for us to collectively to dismiss the minds of others.
Yes.
As a unit in brotherhood and in sisterhood, we need to collectively take a look at these things. And because I've learned just through age, my way is not the only way.
Yes.
My thought is not the only thought.
Oh.
There are other parts in it. When it comes together, it's just a phenomenal piece.
Yes.
And we need to collectively come up and say, hey, you know what? This is how we're going to do this. And maybe you have your role, because everybody is a leader in their own right. She brings together a whole different piece. You bring together a whole different piece. But collectively, we bring a better piece.
Yes. Yes.
And that's what I think, because this Willie Lynch syndrome that we go through, this my way, your way, my way, your way, that is really not being very effective for us as a unit, because when we get dismissed, it's like, okay, no, we need to all go back to the table.
Right.
If we're being dismissed and hit on every platform, no, the time is now for us to unionize and collectively say, hey, wait a minute, I'm taking blows over here, so I need my brothers and sisters to come behind me, because I'm tired of taking these blows. We got to come together as a unit and systematically break this stuff down.
Shawn, do you have any final comments?
Oh, yes. Well, once again, thank you for allowing me to be on this platform. It's definitely been an honor to be with all of you. And I think for me, at least for my part of the A.D.O.S movement, I think now we've done a lot of data, and we'll continue to do that. Now I think it's time for us to put a human face on it. I think one of the reasons that maybe a lot of people have not gotten behind this as we'd like them to is that, reparations can seem theoretical, it can seem legal, and there's bills and all this stuff, but until we start putting a human face to it and showing our people in their desperation, in their kind of, I don't want to say depravity because that's not the right word, but in those desperate situations that they really are, maybe then it'll drive home. Maybe the hookworms in Lowndes County, Alabama, if we have enough pictures of those, maybe that will move some hearts. So I think that's the direction where I see A.D.O.S moving, is putting that human emotion towards the reparation movement. And thank you for everybody for allowing me to be on.
If I may comment really quick to that, a part of it is, as a whole, it was an old saying that, you can teach someone better than you can tell them. You can teach it. If you show them by your actions, you can. People pay attention to not just words; they pay attention to the way we behave. And if we want the people and the masses to come together, it's not just about the face. You know what the face is? The face is your unified face. You know, see, when MLK came out, and I got to take it back there, because even with the March on Washington, there was so many people out there on the March on Washington. But it was a face, but it was a unified face. It was a unified face. You had people all over. I mean, it hurt them to their core when he passed away. We have to, as a whole, come together and show a unified face on reparations. Reparations don't have a unified face. That is why so many people can't get on board with it, because they don't see the leaders of the organizations unified as a whole on the issue.
One
And
of
that's
the things
important.
that I'd like to say, and I know you have to wrap up,
Yeah.
but is that, and I think Shawn and Amy are correct. Shawn is correct. I think what we need to do, and we talked about this in NCOBRA years ago, my mentor and friend Ron Walters, who is now deceased, said the way in which to grow and to show black folk the importance of the reparations movement is to link it.
That's right.
Link what they're going through to reparations, housing, health care, criminal punishment,
Gentrification.
finances, all of those things. Put that in a reparations model. And that's what I think we should do. Thank you for having me.
All right, we have to wrap it up. My guests, Dr. Amy Jenkins, Attorney Amos Jones, Attorney Adjoa Aiyetoro, and by phone, Mr. Shawn Hill. Thank you all so much for coming out on a Friday night when most people are relaxing and maxing for this lively discussion. I'll see you next week. Good night.